Well, hello and a very warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show with me, Andrew Eborn. Who else? Well, I'll tell you who else. We're going to go all the way to South Africa, my favourite time of this programme, and it's to join Errol Musk. How are you, Errol?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you. And you?
Good. Always, well, brilliant, and always nice to see you. And we're having shenanigans all around the world with politics going on, both in the US and also here. And we've got the big debate, if you like, as to who would be the next Conservative leader, having had such a dismal result in the last election a few months ago, and Starmageddon is now in place. The big debate is between Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick. What's your general view?
I don't know these people, but I don't think that position is particularly important. It's an organizational position, and so as long as the person they select, this goes for any organization, is competent. The most competent person. I mean, and the most popular, the one who's most likely to be followed. And to be listened to. So I don't know either of them, but I don't think it's a particularly important position. Politically, I mean, it's more a organizational position.
Yeah, and it is interesting. Well, ballots are being sent to party members this week. The results are due to be announced on the 2nd of November before the US general election. And basically, Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick, the two final candidates after James Cleverly was eliminated. Interestingly, Errol, he was the front runner forever. And then they had this sort of another vote and he got eliminated. So people seemed a bit fickle on that sort of basis. But if you're looking at a leadership qualities then, from that point of view, what do you think is essential qualities in a leader?
Well, again, I don't think this particular position is a leadership position. It's an organizational position. So here you want to get the person who is best at organizing, in this case, it's a political party. We had a situation here in South Africa where the chief organizer for the National Party, P.W. Botha, eventually became state president. But for most of his life, he was an organizational. He left school, went straight into organizing that particular nationalist party, which was, in fact, the party that instituted apartheid, and a very South African Dutch party, but a party that many, as it happens, I have to tell you, a lot of people said they would never vote for them, but then secretly did vote for them. so gave their money to the opposition and then voted for the nationalists. But anyway. No, it's an organizational position. So he's the one person I've ever known of that moved from an organizational position, which he was obviously very good at, to becoming the state president, which he was not particularly good at.
It is interesting because. But you make a very, very interesting point, Errol, as well about this sort of side, because they say lots of people are watching the Andrew Eborn show and they say, oh, next time you get Errol on, I was particularly asked by GB News to get your views and Elon's views on both of those candidates. And you text me back overnight and say, well, I've never heard of them. And I think that's the reality, is it? On an international stage, is when you're looking for a leader, you don't get to hear about these people until they start leading their party and start making an impact.
Well, yes, of course. But you must realize these two individuals that you mentioned would be very, very well known within that organization. And, if I were to come to you today and say that John Forrester has just been made senior vice president at Starlink, what do you think? For example, you'd say, well, I never heard of him. But he's worked his way through the ranks. And he's a very good organizer. He's a very good man. So these good men come all the time. They come up all the time. And, the whole thing is for the poor people like Elon in the end is having to decide, not in this case with the Republican Party, but I'm just saying having to decide which one to use, because usually both candidates are exceptionally capable, exceptionally qualified. So it's really difficult. And, being as it is the way it is at the top, if you choose one, the other one says, well, I'm leaving, I'm resigning, I'm going somewhere else. It's like a very good example of that was the Abbey Sayers and Kano. I think it was Kano were the two candidates to be the first consul of France. The third one, they didn't know what to do about a third one because no one seemed important enough at the time. So they thought, well, let's just throw this bloke Napoleon Bonaparte in, because the third consul is so unimportant that it's not important to worry about him. So we'll use him as a sort of, ammunition. They'll just throw him in. Because the real thing was between Kano and Abbasiyez. Now, some of your visitors will know, some of your viewers will no doubt correct me on the names. But anyway, definitely was Abbasiyez the one. Anyway, the National Assembly at the time held a gathering to vote for the two, but they came out even. This went on and on and on and on and on for days on end until eventually they locked the doors of the National Assembly and said nobody's leaving until one of the two are elected, you see. And eventually they couldn't come to any decision. And so a sort of group said, well, we'll go for this Kano guy, you see. And then Abbas says, well, if that's the case, I'm leaving. And he went back to his farm in the countryside. And nobody knew what to do because nobody had really been elected. And then some bright spark said, what about Napoleon? Let's just have him. So there was like 100% vote in favor of Napoleon, the third consul, who promptly disposed of the other two consul positions 3 weeks later and made himself first consul of France. And the rest is history.
Right.
It
is interesting, and it tends to be a sort of the personalities that seem to sort of dominate and resonate with the electorate. But looking at some of the policies which they talked about, we can talk generally about those. Kemi Badenoch, she's been described as a culture warrior. How important do you think cultural issues are in today's political landscape?
Well, America is a very young country. When it comes to culture, it's very difficult to actually come to any decision about what the culture of the USA is. A person's mind immediately sort of focuses on McDonald's and things like that, McDonald's hamburgers. I mean, it's not a country in which they try. They're too young, to have a culture. We all know what the cultures of European countries are, more or less, and culture, of course, is exceptionally important. America is, of course, the collective remnants of people who fled Europe. So it's 10 different cultures, you might say, all sort of trying to operate as one. And in fact, in America, if you're too outspoken about your particular culture, in my experience anyway, is you won't get very far. The American culture is that nobody's too important. And here we come back to something we were talking about earlier. No one's too important that you can't phone him at 1 o'clock in the morning and say, your dustbin has been emptied on my front driveway, or your cat's in my dustbin, or something like that. No one's too important. And I like that. I like that about America. No one is too important. And so culture-wise, I think a lot of things have been said about American culture that are much more smarter than anything I could say. But generally, the drift about American culture is that there is none. From the European, sort of great people, that one thing they don't have to worry about is American culture because it basically doesn't exist.
well, they always talk about it, sort of starting just 100 years or so ago, and obviously we've been going on for centuries here in the UK.
Yes.
And that sort of stuff. But looking at the policy, and you've been in politics for a long time, and I guess the big differences between the parties, a couple of big differences between the candidates rather. Badenoch emphasised a return to core conservative values. That's what she says. While Jenrick is focusing on detailed policy proposals. What do you think is more effective for a leader to advocate? Is it principles or more concrete solutions? What do you think?
No, principles come from, well, I suppose the policy comes from the political leaders. Here again, we come back to the fact these are organizational people. So what you want in a position there is like the best office manager you can ever get. Now, when Elon and Kimball started out, they were both somewhat tech orientated, and it was the very first company that they had. And there was a chap from Toronto called Greg Kouris, and Greg was an estate agent. He was a realtor or estate agent, which is, look, it's difficult to say what a estate agent is, but it's somebody, like, it's a job anybody can sort of do, supposedly. But anyway, he came along with all he had was 25,000 Canadian dollars, and he said he'd like to be part of this operation. You see, cut a long story short, 2.5 years later, he picked up about $20 million or $15 to $20 million, as his share and he retired. But he was an extraordinarily good manager. So he became an office manager, and he knew absolutely nothing about computers, and he knew absolutely nothing about putting newspapers on and data onto the internet and so on. But he was an extremely good manager, and it was quite evident when you went to eventually, you know, that 1,800 people there, and he had them all dancing like an orchestra at his fingertips. So nobody's ever heard of him, and yet he was an extremely good manager, and that's what you need in a political party as well. I mean, you know, you need that. You need somebody who can see where it's no good. It's no good having great ideas and all that sort of stuff. If you haven't got ways and means of getting all the people that you need to vote for you and to be able to vote for you and to, you know, it's management that we're talking about here. So if these two are great idea specialists and political specialists, I'd say they're the wrong people. You want somebody who's, like the sort of, what do you call it, the mainstay of the old British organizational system, you know, who can come to South Africa, which they did in 1800, where there were no roads and no schools. And within about a year or two, there were 17 miles of roads and 21 schools. And nobody knows who did it, but it's one of those guys that is good at organization did that. There was nothing before. And within a very short period, I think it was less than 2 years, there were roads and schools.
Yeah.
So
it's about those sort of results, isn't it? And you have a look at that sort of stuff. And the other thing, whenever they're in-party elections, if you like, is you don't want them to rubbish the other candidates so much. The ultimate game is obviously in 2030 or thereabouts to beat Starmer. But if you rubbish your opponent, then it's only going to come back to haunt you, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, look, politics and the you know, what's the right word, vernacular? It is in politics is essentially shouting the other person down. It's not, you know, it's normal. I like it. It's the way it is, you know. You know, it's about strength of personality and all that sort of stuff. Of course, if somebody starts using dirty tricks or saying horrible, you know, dirty tricks, that's not good. I mean, obviously people can see through that. But there are people, I mean, I think of Churchill, you know, he said, I don't know all the things, you know, I've read some of his stuff. I mean, I liked him very much. And, you know, he said, he said in Parliament one time, I remember, that so-and-so is a liar, for which he was, what do you call it, censored or something?
Yes, you know, reprimanded, yes. Because you can't use, it's non-political, non-house language. You're calling somebody a liar.
Yeah, they say it was brought before, those days, of course, I suppose in the 30s or something, he was brought before a disciplinary committee. But later on, he went in, and it's not that smart, really, nowadays. But anyway, he said, I would like to say so-and-so is something, but I'll just call him a 51AR. A 51AR. You know, LIAR, you know, Roman lettering. He's a 51AR, you know.
Yeah.
So they you know, sort of gets around it like that. Everybody gets a laugh out of that, you see.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. But it is difficult because that goes back to the things, and it is these sort of dirty politics and these little sound bites that people go for and that sort of stuff. And it tends to be that sort of rhetoric. And one of the other central issues is obviously immigration, and it's all about that sort of stuff. And the European Convention on Human Rights and what should happen there. And people have been saying, look, well, the lawyers are basically interfering because you've got the European Convention on Human Rights. You try to send these illegal immigrants back, but the lawyers get in the way. So Robert Jenrick is saying, look, we should get out of the European Convention on Human Rights and do our own thing. Kemi Badenoch says we should try and work with it and make the system work. What's your view on that?
Well, I'd say it's a bit of both. I mean, it's a bit of both, obviously. So you can't do one and leave the other. You can't do the other and leave the other. No, you must. It's a bit of both. Quite obviously. And you know, I think you probably have a situation here where you've got two very capable people, and it's a difficult one to decide upon. The big thing is you don't want the one who's somehow, and often not for the right reasons, loses, to say, I'm packing it in now, I'm going away, I'm going somewhere else. He should be roped in somehow as, you know, second in command, or you know, you don't lose that person because he's not elected. Or you might even go to co-management or something like that, you know, dual management, which is not bad. It's happened a lot. I've seen it happen a lot, and it works very well. Especially people are very in sync with one another. Two people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, obviously, it's a male versus female contest as well. Women in leadership, and Kemi's been compared a couple of times to Mrs. T, and they're not quite sure if that's Margaret Thatcher or Liz. Not quite sure
Yeah.
which T might be. Given your experience, how significant do you think Kemi Badenoch's candidacy is for the representation of women in leaderships within the Conservative
Well, look,
Party?
I mean, obviously, it's a very good thing that we that a capable woman, is brought in. I mean, women have had a raw deal for a long time. I mean, it was only 100 years ago that they didn't have the vote. Emily Pankhurst and all that. I mean, you know, in fact, only I think in 1917 did all men in the UK get the vote. I think before that it was only some people. But at any rate, women have had to push for, look, the sexes are not equal. They're different. They're two different species, to my mind. But they need to be. Their talents need to be tapped from all directions. I mean, a capable woman. I think of my mother. Gee, I put her in charge. There wouldn't be many people standing afterwards. If they went up against her. But anyway, no, very tough British woman. But no, look at Thatcher. I mean, she showed quite clearly what people are capable of. And then you've got in the science world, you've got Marie Curie, you've got so many extraordinary women. So no, I don't even think that should be an issue. On the other hand, I mean, if a woman is elected, it's great for the women in the world to see that they are being taken notice of, and not the way it was before, where they automatically weren't taken notice of. I mean, I used to rent out homes here that I had in a place called like the Embassy Lane. I invested in properties like that. My son said I'm stupid, but anyway, should put in board chairs instead. But anyway, I had an Indonesian ambassador on one occasion, and then on another occasion I had the Sudanese ambassador renting two different homes. And they were very nice people. And when we were invited there, both of them invited us for dinners and things like that, And when you went there, the women were relegated to the kitchen. You see, so but kind of weird, because you sit with the men, and then of course I would take my own wife, and I didn't know what was going to happen. Was she going to sit in the kitchen with everybody else? But no, they let her sit with us. But I don't think they were very happy with it. And so I don't know. I mean, obviously this comes down through the ages. It's not as though it's a brand new thing. I mean, the volume has been written about this kind of thing. No, I'd say it's a very good idea to include women. And if this woman gets elected, I'm sure she'll probably do a very good job.
Yeah. Well, the biggest battle, and this is what people have got to look at, is the next general election. You've been very clear on your views and Elon's views on Starmer. What are the characteristics that the next Conservative leader should bring to highlight the deficiencies, if you like, of Starmer?
You mean the new leader should influence Starmer?
Yes. So this is, as I say, it's Badenoch versus Jenrick for the leadership of the Conservative Party. They will then be going head to head with Starmer, obviously with pre-MQs and leading the party of opposition.
Well, I think Starmer has to tune things down a bit, are there people serving sentences for Facebook violations?
Yeah, there's all sorts of things going on. There's a recent
well, that's unbelievable.
over 2.5 years.
Starmer needs to be doing a tremendous amount of backpedaling if he expects to remain in a position there. He's going to have to do a lot of backpedaling. I mean, these things don't just die away. They don't just fade away. They just simply do not fade away. And so we have. To my mind, at any rate, a very disappointing situation in England. Harold Wilson is long ago, of course, I still remember him before your time, I suppose. I mean, he was a disappointing sort of bloke. He was very disappointing. But, but he wasn't that disappointing. He wasn't as disappointing as Starmer, So,
so would you say that if you were ranking disappointing prime ministers, how far up would Starmer be?
Well, Starmer's actually, taken the cake. I mean, he's really taken the cake. He doesn't look like a prime minister. He doesn't behave like a prime minister, and which may be good. I don't know. Maybe it's a new way of things. Maybe it's important. Maybe it's great. Maybe that's the way it should be. But I've always been looking at these sort of people as overly capable fathers of society. That I can rely on. That I don't have to worry about it when I'm running my electrical business or my plumbing or something. I've got this bloke up there knows much more than me, and he's doing a good job. And these people know what they're doing. No, I think at the moment people are probably walking around in a bit of a daze in England. If I was in England, I would be walking around in a bit of a daze, because I think some of the things I've said on this interview that with you I might have had the police at my door the next day or something. I mean,
now. There you go.
As a matter of fact, I see in the news they said that I said Starmer is stupid. I didn't say stupid. I said he's stupid to not have invited Elon and people like him to their science or their development summit that they had. That was what I said was stupid. I didn't aim at him directly and say he's stupid. I mean, that's not a nice thing to do.
I think it was the Labour Party. It was a stupid decision, was the point. So yes. Sometimes editorial, you pick the one word which screams out, don't you? But no, it was a stupid decision. That was your point.
Yeah, stupid decision. It's stupid. And I myself, went into a parking space the other day that was not allowed to be in, and I got a fine. And the reason is I was stupid. So I've also been stupid on occasion.
Well, a stupid decision. It was a stupid action, wasn't it? And if you're trying to lead, and it was interesting seeing all the comments on your interview, which the chat last time. All of the people said, "Look, you're absolutely right. You and Elon are worth 1,000 times more than these politicians in terms of just bringing common sense."
Yes. Look, I mean, I think the problems you've got there have been brewing, for a long time, and it's much like I've got a stove in my home, and I know it's not wired properly, but I manage every time by not touching the metal parts because it's alive in places, and I say, well, I'll manage like that. And you go on and on and on until somebody comes to your home and doesn't know about it and gets shocked, So you let something brew for a long time. And then this is the immigration system in England and various other things that I'm not totally up on, but I see you have problems there. This incredibly wonderful country that has always been a blessing on the world has become problematic, and the issues that were being fought about recently were very they had very good reasons for the people protesting. And obviously, if you get a bunch of hooligans together and they see the advantage of being able to damage things just for fun or something like that, that's bad, of course. That's terrible. And they must pay for their damage. But, normally just complaining about a thing is absolutely normal. There should be a complaints basket somewhere where they can all put their complaint in, and it has to be taken notice of. I do believe that in England, if you have if you have a petition over 100,000 or something, it has to be raised in Parliament.
That's right. You can get these sort of different petitions that people put up on the campaign, and they get these signatures, and then it is debated in Parliament, which is good. You need that sort of democracy. The other thing that both candidates for leadership, they face criticisms internally. How should a leader manage internal party conflicts?
Well, I mean, there's the way of doing it is if you go out of line, you're thrown out. We had that in the Nationalist Party here. When I was the city councillor of Pretoria, which is the capital city at the time, so it was quite an important council, and I was often in meetings with the Prime Minister and so on, because we were sort of tied up together in a lot of things. But anyway, they made it quite clear that any of their councillors, which was the other 29, there were 30 of us, more or less the other 29, if they weren't allowed to say anything about anything. So if they were asked a question, they would always defer it to the leadership, And I was not in that situation, so I was able to be quoted in the newspapers every second day because I didn't have anybody to answer to. Anyway, but no, I mean, obviously the right way to do things, and here we can start thinking about Elon and the way he runs his companies, is to make sure that everybody who's involved really likes what they're doing, And that's very, very important. They must love their job. And, and you have to address people's issues, everything that people raise. If someone raises even the tiniest issue that, there's not enough water coolers or something like that, you have to take it into account. You have to let everybody have. It's very difficult. I mean, it's not simple, but it can't be a situation where people are frightened to say anything. That's terrible. I mean, you can't have that. You have to be able to. And we did have that a great deal of success here in South Africa when we would go to political meetings. I would go to political meetings, and the Afrikaners, the South African Dutch men I say, are a strange breed. Jan Smuts, who was a very famous South African, he said, my problem is I've got to raise an army here of burghers or citizens, soldiers, and every single one thinks he should have been chosen as the general.
Right.
Why they have to? You have to explain to every single one. Jan Smuts said, why I'm the general and he's not the general, because they all saw themselves as quite capable of being the general. And that's a very good thing in many ways, having such an outstanding group of people. Of course, when it comes to taking orders, if they don't like the order or they think it's not what they would have decided, well, then they just disagree with you and they don't do it. But it's a complicated thing. And I think if you look at, again, looking at Napoleon, I mean, I've read a lot on Napoleon. Elon loves Napoleon. Napoleon used the strong arm, used the strong arm. So he didn't like it, he used the strong arm. So, fortunately for Napoleon, most of the things he decided upon were right, and the other people were wrong. So that helped a great deal. As Elon has said, if Napoleon had not been deposed by the decadent monarchs of that time, we would have had the internet by the year 1900.
Right.
I think he also said we'd be on the moon by the year 1900. I'm not sure about that, but I know he did say we'd have had the internet by the year 1900 if Napoleon had still been allowed to continue.
Yeah.
So how you run an organization determines whether the organization is going to be a success or not.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. The other thing which has been emphasized are the backgrounds. So Kemi Badenoch, she's got a background in engineering. She served as Secretary of State for International Trade and Minister for Women and Equalities. Jenrick has a legal background and business background as well, specialized in corporate law and an executive at Christie's. He's also served in multiple ministerial roles. He was leadership, contest strategy. He basically was health and housing was his thing. So it is interesting then. So in terms of character, people have to listen to this and how influenced that you and Elon are in people deciding things. What elements, when they look at the two different candidates, which elements should they be looking at in particular, which would make them more appealing than Starmer?
Well, I mean, having the right person at the head of an organization makes all the difference in the world. If you don't have the right person, well, that organization, if it's already been going for a long time, might continue for a long time. But having the right person in a position can move that organization like the speed of light. I mean, you to look at Steve Jobs and you look at, I suppose you have to include Bill Gates and these people, Elon, in those worlds, tech worlds and so on. If you have the right people, right man, and again, the opposite applies. If you have the wrong person, then the country or the organization just goes down like a rocket. I could never quite understand it. And people complain about the fact that these days I see CEOs get much more money than they used to get. I mean, they often get millions for their job, which was never the case 50 years ago. They got a normal salary plus a little bit or something. But the reason is that having the right person at the top has made businesses that were basically defunct or about to go defunct reestablish themselves as leading businesses. And yes, so who you have is very, very important, very, very important. And charisma is very important. I mean, no charisma, not going to work. I think here we're sitting with Starmer. He's obviously a nice person. I don't know. I imagine I look at his wife. I always judge men by look at their wives. He's got a lovely looking wife. She looks very balanced and decent and everything. That tells me a lot about Starmer, so he must also be balanced and decent. But but his charisma is a bit like on the short side, from what I can see. So you need a little bit of charisma, where people will say, "Look, I'll follow this idiot no matter what. I'll follow him because I just believe in him." You've got the military where that type of thing is very important, and of course in business, a lot of people who've made a great success of businesses and themselves have always sounded a bit crazy at the beginning, with what they had in mind, and so people, with a more sort of balanced upbringing, look at them and say, "Well, I don't want to be part of this idiot's operation. I'm going to leave," only to cry many years later when they are, standing at the door saying, "Do you remember me? I used to work for you, or used to work with you." Charisma is power, strength of personality, the right ideas, listening to people. I think a lot of improvements happen when you start listening to your underling managers, to start with.
It certainly makes sense. Well, it's interesting. They just had this GB News debate. The audience favoured Kemi Badenoch on that. About 75% believe she performed better than Jenrick, probably because of the charisma point. As you mentioned, she's certainly a charismatic character. Well, we're all going to find out. It's all going to become relevant, as they say, on November the 2nd. So the wait is not too far to go. Any final thoughts in helping people decide?
No, I don't. I think the people who will decide probably know themselves already who they want. The big thing is not to lose the other person. It's not about who is elected. The person who's elected, great. It's the one that is probably equally qualified who isn't selected, must be retained somehow and satisfied. And that person's talents need to be kept in the loop, sort of thing. So no, that's the big thing, is to not have a disillusioned person walk away.
Yeah, no. So some excellent points. You don't want to lose one good person just because you've elected another good person.
Yes, absolutely. No, you have to keep them both. They have to both be in there.
Fantastic. Errol, as always, thank you very much. When we come back, we will go closer to home. We'll talk about US politics and the latest news about X. But for now, Errol, thank you for joining me.
Okay, thank you.